Welcome to the main event. Let's get ready to rumble!
Y'all ready for this?
Hey, everybody, how's it going? It's your boy from Brooklyn, Chef Shannon Ambrosio, just saying, what the heck is going on? Let's hope that this thing is working and everything is good. But we won't know until I can turn this on. Oh, do I have this feedback now? Oh, hello. Hello? Oh, that's my phone. That's my phone with the noise there. I was like, wait a minute, where am I getting this reverb from? But now I see. Well, actually, now I hear. And I am extremely excited this Sunday. Two reasons. One, because I really want to get into this topic that I chose for today, and I hope it's all good. Yo, what up? Thomas Mad Dog is with us already. What? But I've really been working on getting a lot of the, the extra stuff that I work on here. So the Stream Deck that I have here has a lot of new features on it. So a lot of the different things that I've been saying that I'm going to be doing to the Stream Deck and for the live stream on my podcast is finally inside the Stream Deck, right? So all the new additions, and not New Edition, the group New Edition. And if you're old enough like me, then you know who New Edition is, right? Also known as Belle Biv DeVoe, and so on, right? So that's what's going on. It's Sunday. It's time for another Everything and Nothing podcast. And as you can see, I'm trying new things, but I'm also getting the older things that I started with, and to have a better use during the stream, if that makes sense. I hope it does, and that's for sure, because I've really been working on this thing a lot, and you'll see, because I'm going to start working on them right now, and we'll go back here, and now I'll go here, and now I'm going to go here, and of course I threw up. There's the new logo for Everything and Nothing Studios down there on the left, as you could see. I changed some of the graphics. I redid some of the graphics. And I also added a lot of overlays and different things for the podcast, which I'm very excited about, right? And that brings me to the discussion for this Sunday on the Everything and Nothing podcast. And it brings me to the discussion that it's about education and about how to educate and what we think about educate now, as opposed to what school systems are doing, as opposed to how governments and school systems educate our young children, our future, to what's going to be happening here in this country and abroad. I mean, that's just in general, the idea of the educational system. You know, I mean, it runs across countries all over the world. But here in particular, because this is the one I'm the most familiar with, of course, I've only been educated and used the education system here in America. Haven't used any of the other educational systems. And I couldn't tell you how they are, you know, and how they use their education system. But working on all these things that I do to create this, I keep looking up, I'm sorry, folks, but to create this podcast that I do, the live stream, which is basically broadcasting. So basically what I'm doing, I keep saying basically again, but I really, listen to me, Thomas, you got to correct me every once in a while. And Sandra, how are you, Sandra? So the idea is this. The idea is that the word education, and everybody here and anybody who listens and watches this needs to look it up, right? Educate or education means that you get to think for yourself. That's what educate means. Educate is to educate somebody, to give somebody enough information for them to go out and think for themselves to further their education, right? Okay, so I hope that makes sense to people out there, right? So when you educate, it means to give somebody the basis as to how to do something or how to think about doing something. And then you as the individual basically have to, I said it again, Thomas, you got to get me on this one, folks. So what you and I have to do out on our own, once somebody gives us the base or the basics to understand what the learning process is, and that is to give you enough information to go out there and discover it on your own. That's what educate means. And what education is to give yourself the ability to do and think for yourself once you're out there, once you're out in the open doing these different things, right? I always use this as a reference. John Dewey was a great philosopher and a thinker. And John Dewey's principle is something I think everybody needs to adopt in their educational system, right? Which is basically you can read 100 books on building a bridge and you're not a bridge builder until you build a bridge, right? Because there are variables involved in every learning process in every part of education that we know of. So when we have this educational system here in America, and we basically teach our children, right, a regurgitation of information that's been, spread across time, right? We do not allow young adults or children or whatever to think for themselves in any way, shape, or form, right? We kind of nowadays in the educational system, we kind of use those malleable minds and the easy way to manipulate them to basically regurgitate information that we want them to say or we want them to do. So if you think about it, and what educate means is we wouldn't have the technology we have today as anything, right? I mean, electricity, I mean, running water, plumbing systems, I mean, carpentry, building homes instead of living in caves, and agriculture and farming. It all has to do with self-education, right? When you think about the way things happen. So when we think about the computer systems and what we use now in these real times, as we're doing right now, as you and I are discussing and coming up with these topics, or I'm coming up with the topics and then we're discussing it, is that there was somebody who thought about this idea of a computer and the way it works and how it works, and they sat alone by themselves, all with a different group of people that had like interest, and basically they created this. That's it. That's how this education was formed. So the learning process is not by regurgitation or rehearsal or repetition. And yes, you get good at something if somebody shows you repetition. And you can get good at it in the same aspect, right? So somebody shows you how to put this together, this particular thing, and they show you this piece, and this piece, and you put it together. You can become familiar with it and become proficient and efficient at it and learn to do the process really fast, right? But wait a minute. Isn't there another way? Isn't there another process? Isn't there... In your mind, if you have the ability and they educated you properly and they said to you, well, take this thing now that we showed you what to do with it and how to build it, and think of a different way that you can do this better, faster, and easier. The guy who owns Fast Cap Industries, where I buy some of the products that I use for woodworking and fabrication of any kind, this gentleman basically has a system where he goes around and has his employees, which he doesn't think of them as employees, which I love that. And he says to them, listen to me, come to me with any ideas that you may have of doing whatever it is that you're doing better, fast, and easier. So I can learn it, so I can share it, so we can share it, so we can become more educated on the things that we do, the processes, the reasons, the outcomes. All of these things are part of educating. And education, it's important. It's important that we allow people to think for themselves. It's important that we give them the tools necessary to move beyond the point of whatever it is they have that little bit of knowledge from us as teachers or mentors or, you know, whatever it may be. I don't care. And it all starts from somewhere, and it all starts from wherever it is that you are getting educated from, okay? Because the education system and the idea of what we thought and going forward from when it all started was that, you know, you give people the idea that they have enough inside their own heads and have a way of thinking that things can be done differently, right? Because we don't want the same thing done every time. We all know that, right? History will repeat itself unless you're educated enough to think for yourself and to change that process and the way the system works. So it has to be done that way. The education and the thought process has to be given to the individual for a reason. Because without that, the idea of the stunt of the growth of our brain and who we are as people will, it will come to a halt eventually. Eventually we'll all be, you know, like I said, we'll all be robots. We'll all be pitching everything the same way that somebody else pitched it to us, right? We all notice these things immediately, right? So if we, you know, you've been on a solicitor call, right? And I don't know how much that happens now, but now we get tons of emails and tons of other things that happen that where you can tell automatically when somebody's reading from a script, right? You can tell, you know, hey, hello, Mr. Ambrosio. Today I'd like to tell you about this, and this, and that, and that. Right? It's a script. So the idea is the regurgitation and the process happens is that it's the same. And then what happens, right? We all become this, you know, this herded group of people that all think the same, that all believe the same thing, that all, and we all know that that's not the case. We all know that it's it shouldn't be the process as to which we are allowed, or they tell us we are allowed to think for ourselves. It doesn't make any sense, if that makes sense to you. I hope it does. I hope that makes sense to you in the fact that we're all given the same ability to think for ourselves. And when it's taken away, it's usually done at in a younger age than we are, right? So the idea is we think about young adults and young children, and we understand that their process of thinking is malleable. We understand their process of thinking can be formed and shaped. And that's why the education system has turned in, my opinion, has turned into the way it is now, which is a repetitious regurgitation of information that I don't know if the government's giving it to us, who's giving it to us. But when you create this idea that you're not allowing students or young people to think for themselves, you're basically, your success rate is going to be minimal. And I think my thought process on what's happening now is that's what they want. That's what governments and leaders and these people that call themselves leaders want from us. They want us to be formed and listen to exactly what they say to do when they do it, right? We all have that old adage, and it's such a horrible one, you know, don't do as I do, do as I say. And how horrible is to think about things in that manner, right? So basically if they told us all, which they did, if they told us all to do one thing all around this entire planet, and they scared us enough to make us think that it's all real for all the time, and they said, everybody do this now. And we all did it. We all did it. For whatever it's worth, we all just bowed and allowed whatever they told us to do. And anybody who went against it was no good, right? They created this idea that they decided that if we didn't listen to them, that we're the bad ones. They didn't give us enough information. They didn't educate us enough. So they just expected us to do as we were told. And my goodness, even as children, even young children, and we see it, and I know we do, we all, right? If you have been a parent and you have children or you've been around children, we all know that it happens, right? And we call them the bad apple, or we push them to the side and they say, oh, this one right here is, they're not like the rest. And I say, well, we all shouldn't be the same. We all shouldn't be like the rest, right? So when a child is defiant, we scold them, or and when a child says, no, I don't want that. No, I don't want to eat that. No, I don't want to do this. And no, I don't want to do that. And we make them and we force them. But is it true? Is it really the way it should be? I mean, there are many aspects to the way this works out, right? As parents to children, yes, there is a way you want to have your children raised in the way you see fit, okay? And in the understanding that that's the way it should be, right? Those are your children. Those are your spawns. These are the things that we think about a lot, right? Especially now with things that are happening, right? We just had that whole thing happen in Florida, where the education, that state down there basically says, listen, from now on, it's not that we're not allowing certain words to be said. We're not allowing teachers, okay? Teachers in the public school systems to fill children's minds with the idea of certain things. The whole idea of education and educating young adults and young children is to give them the tools that they need to think for themselves when they are old enough to make certain decisions. I think that's a normal thing that we see, okay? So when you go to school and you have these educationers or these teachers, pushing agendas, maybe it's their own agenda. I wouldn't know. Maybe it's the agenda of the school system. And where does the public school system come from, right? The idea of the curriculums and how these things are formed and why they're formed. And it's because somebody has to regulate or regulation. Again, regulation, repetition, regurgitation. All this information that they are giving to our young children and young adults for them not to be allowed to think for themselves, right? So they're saying if the teachers are telling them, if you have a problem with your parents or the people that are raising you, then you need to come to us and we will do it for you. And I say, wait a minute here. I'd like to understand for a minute that education and educating young people and young minds and malleable minds and formable thought processes, they belong to either the parents or they belong to that person. That individual has to learn to educate themselves, eventually to be out on their own, to be able to be free-formed and free-thinking, away from government control, away from their parental guidance. These are the things, these are the tools and the education system young people need to understand that they get to be who they are. And by now, by all means, we are seeing more separation than ever. So when young people start and they're telling them to create these silos and they're telling them that it's okay to separate themselves from everybody else. And I say, well, they're creating these borders for us. And what does that create? It creates dependency on somebody that they need to run to every time they feel offended or they feel something is wrong or they don't feel accepted by another group. Well, I hate to tell you, not everybody is liked by everybody. But you can't separate and silo people just for the sake of control. So they say it, but they don't believe it, right? Because the old adage of, together, if we stand together, all of us, right? Divided, we fall. Divided, we fall. It's not the other way around. If we are constantly allowing them to divide us by whatever group they want to choose to give us a name for, whatever group decides a name that they want to have for them, and if everybody else has to be offended or has to understand or has to be manipulated to accept certain things, What does that do to us for our brain formation? What does that do to young adults and young children? It separates them. It creates the silo. It allows them to control us. It allows them to constantly play the card, constantly allows them to play the card with education. So if they're telling us in schools that we need to be separated in the classroom already, my goodness, how are we ever going to learn to get along outside of classrooms, outside of this manipulation of what's happening? It's not a good thing. They've done it so many times already by controlling us by borders, by giving us these borders, by saying this is one place, this is another place, that's another place. We've already allowed them to do that to us. They've allowed us to become their own patriots. And that's horrible. That's a horrible way to be. And I say, when you're thinking about education and educating, you have to give young people, children, young adults, and even adults, you have to give them the choice to choose what it is they accept and what it is they do not accept. That's for the individual. It's not for a government to tell us what. They gave us an idea of what freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of choice, freedom of all these things. They gave us these. They told us we could have them. And I say, who are they to tell anybody what they can have and what they cannot have? Is it their right? Is it their right to tell us what we can and can't have? Is it their right to tell us what we can say, what we can't say? Who we can believe in, who we can't believe in? What we can do, what we can't do? It's not a good place. It's not a good place that every time we think about it, that they're going to recreate the idea of what they call freedoms. It's not a good thing. We're not going to get along. I'm just letting you know. We're not going to get along if they don't let us. That's how it's going to work. We are not going to get along with one another no matter where we are, no matter where we're located, no matter what we believe in and how we believe in, whatever we believe in. They're not going to let us get along, because if they do, then they do not have control. They do not have control, then that means their pockets are not going to keep getting lined with whatever they're calling currency at the time. I don't know. I don't know how this plays out, but I know it's not getting better. It seems to be having this twist and turn constantly, right? I talked about this in the last podcast, and you know this whole idea of war, right? So the idea of war is a control piece, right? There's never been a time on this planet where the humans have existed where we have not been at war with each other. It just haven't, right? You think about the idea of the animal kingdom, and people think, well, even animals war. And I go, no, they don't. They survive. They survive by surviving. They're not creating war for no reason. So in other words, 100,000 buffalo are not chasing down 6 lions to kill them. They're just moving about their business to get to the next thing that they have to get to. And the same thing with the lion. The lion is not here. All the lions and lionesses and all those animals don't get together and say, hey, let's go kill this one race of animal. No, they don't. They have to survive. They have to understand what the survival is. And that's how it works. It doesn't work in reverse. So in other words, if the lion said, oh, well, we'll just kill all the other big predators and then we won't have anything to worry about. And I said, well, you will. There'll be something else that you'll have to worry about. They don't think in that pattern. They think in a pattern of survival. They think in a pattern of, I need this to get by to the next day or to feed mine, and then that's it. And they move on. They don't separate themselves. We see it all the time. All the animals have existed on this planet all together at one point without the idea of conflict. The conflict only comes from necessity. It doesn't come from anything else, right? We don't think of it that way. We tend to think in a different way. And besides that, we're eating up most of the land anyway. But that's how I feel, right? And education is just a very early stage of what our minds seem to grasp as acceptable and unacceptable, if that makes any sense. Hello, Donella. How are you? But to me, it makes a lot of sense, right? Jordan Peterson was talking the other day on his channel, on his YouTube channel, and I would love for everybody just to take 9 minutes out of my wonderful time here, and I'd love to introduce you to, and he's not talking about here in the United States directly, okay? Indirectly, he's saying a lot. If you understand the message, he's saying a lot, because when we started out, right, America wasn't America. Whatever it was called by the native people that were here. But now we're America, and then above us is North America, and below us is South America, and we claim that we don't own these places. But isn't that called Canada, and aren't the South American countries below us called something else? Why is it North America and South America now, right? I talk about this, the education, right? How do they educate us? They educate us the way they want us to, the way they want to manipulate us to believe certain things. So when you think about it, you have to think about the whole thing as, yo, what up, and you have to think about the whole reason why governments and controlling leaders do the things they do. I don't think anybody breaks it down enough for it to be simple for an understanding point, right? So in other words, when we think about the education system and what they teach us exactly what they want us to know. They don't want us to do any more digging. They don't want us to ask any more questions. They do not want us to form our own opinions about how we feel about things. They want to tell us that that's it, and that's it. And that's the way it is. Don't think about it anymore. Just do that. Just do this. And then we'll tell you what to do next. We'll tell you how to think next. We'll tell you how to raise your kids next. That's happening. And it's going to happen. I know we don't think so. But us, as people, we relinquish a lot of the responsibility, me included. Not a great father at all. But the idea is, what they give us and our children, okay, they expect us to just go along with it as well, right? So whatever they're showing or teaching or want our children to learn inside the school system that they created, they come home, and then we're supposed to just fall in line with it, right? You ever been to a teacher-parent conference? We all know how those work, right? They bring us into the room individually, not amongst all the parents, and they bring you in just the way they want you, and then teachers scold you about your children. And I say, well, I didn't teach them that at home, so I don't know where they're getting it from. Could it be here? Could it be the fact that these teachers in these school systems that they have, they don't want all the parents in the room at the same time? Because the teacher does not want to be held accountable for the responsibilities that they have. And yes, it's a lot. It's a lot. For us, as parents and guardians of children, to relinquish that for 8 to 10 hours a day, right? How when you think about it, right? If you decided that you didn't want to have your children in a place at a certain time, you would go get them, right? If there was crazy people hanging around the park when your kid was at the park, you go get your kid. But we don't think about that in our school systems. We just push them there. We just go, yo, go there and listen to them now. So what are they going to do? If all the other children are doing the same, what is your child going to do? He's going to do the same. He's going to follow along, right? Like they say, if everybody jumped off the bridge, would you jump off the bridge too? And I tell you what, most people would. Most people would follow that direction, because we, as parents and adults and guardians, we've allowed that to happen, right? It used to be the other way around. And now it just seems that they're telling us, once that child is there, that they're telling us, they're reprimanding us for raising our children and putting forth the ideals and ideology that we have in our homes. They're telling us that that's no good. And then they're giving these children, young children and young adults, this idea that what you're learning at home is no good. Come to us, we'll tell you what to do. And that's not a good way to be. When we put our children in school, or we put our young adults in places where they're supposed to be learning, they're supposed to be learning. They're supposed to be learning a lot of things, but they're not supposed to be told what they should do with themselves. They're supposed to be given the math. Learn how the number system works here. Learn how to speak our language, write our language. Maybe learn another language. Maybe write another language. Expand your mind. Expand the idea of the thinking process so that when you have the time to be out on your own and to do the things that you want, you're educated enough to understand the differences. And that's what the education system has to be. It needs to be. It shouldn't have that kind of interference. It just shouldn't. It has to be done differently. It has to go back to the way it was. It has to go back to mentorship, apprenticeships, to understanding of what the learning process is. It just does. That's my thought. That's my thought. That's a whole bunch of thoughts. I know it. I know it is. But please, just for about 9 minutes, just give Jordan, just give him a listen to. And like I said, I know it's not happening here, but it's so close to home that he knows, and I know, believe me, the ripple effect, it happens. It just does.
The subversion of the entire education system in Ontario, K-12 as well as colleges and universities, to the radically leftist doctrines known as critical theory, a thoroughly anti-Western ideology, both postmodern and Marxist in its derivation, based on the idea that all our extant institutions are racist, sexist. Hello, everyone. You may remember a few years ago, 2016 in the fall to be precise, that I recorded a video alerting people to what I saw as the dangers of a bill C-16 that I regarded as an attempt to make compelled speech mandatory in Canada. Many of you watching this will be familiar with the events that transpired in consequence. Unfortunately, I feel compelled to do something similar today in a variety of different ways in relationship to another bill, a provincial one this time, Bill 67, which purports to address racist issues in the entire Ontario education system. I'm going to read something that I wrote about this as a warning. A warning to citizens of Ontario and Canada. Bill 67, which purports to be nothing but an anti-racist bill, is in fact the most pernicious and dangerous piece of legislation that any Canadian government has attempted to put forward. And I hope I'm not saying that lightly. It will make mandatory the subversion of the entire education system in Ontario, K-12 as well as colleges and universities, to the radically leftist doctrines known as critical theory, a thoroughly anti-Western ideology, both postmodern and Marxist in its derivation, based on the idea that all our extant institutions are racist, sexist, and discriminatory in their essence. Critical theorists assume that history is best understood as the war between identity groups, with one group always oppressing and all other groups always victimized and exploited. Critical theorists dismiss the idea of the sovereign, free individual, claiming that belief in such sovereignty and freedom does nothing but justify the oppression and exploitation of the marginalized. In keeping with that rejection, such theorists assume that human identity itself is best understood at the group level, with markers of race, sex, so-called gender, and sexual preference dominating. Critical theorists reject the presumption of individual innocence, absent proof of wrongdoing, assuming that membership in a group regarded as dominant and exploitative is sufficient to indicate the moral culpability of any given member of that group. Critical theorists define offense and harm as subjectively determined. Anyone who feels victimized by any statement made by anyone for any reason is fully justified in their feeling and claim of harm, regardless of the intent of the author of the statement, who is then to be deemed guilty of such victimization and denied even the opportunity for a reasonable defense. Bill 67 will mandate the creation of institutions of inquisition in every educational institution, to which anyone who has an opinion or undertakes an action that is perceived to violate the tenets of critical theory will be made necessarily subject to punishment. The author of this bill, MPP Laura May Lindo, NDP, Kitchener Centre, is former head of equity at Laurier University. It was Laura May Lindo who developed the policies that resulted in the circumstances that enveloped Lindsay Shepherd in 2017, which produced a scandal provincially, nationally, and internationally, left a permanent stain on Canadian universities, on the reputation of Canadian universities, and demolished that young woman's academic ambitions and future. The fact that the Ontario Conservative government has allowed and even encouraged such legislation to be put forward under their aegis, and then ignorant and careless enough to vote in support of it, is a woeful indication of both the perniciousness and deviance of the ideas that the legislation contains, and evidence of their own, the Conservatives' own, stunning and continued inability to see the danger such doctrines present. It is much harder to actually deal with the fact of the sometimes unjust distribution of privileges and resources in a complex society than to kowtow to radicals who know how to viciously accuse, weaponize guilt, and claim through manipulative sloganeering the moral upper hand. But there's no excuse for the Conservatives and for the classical liberals, who also believe in the sovereignty of the individual, to trumpet their compassion for the oppressed by allowing authoritarian ideologues to gain their treacherous way. This bill, 67, threatens the integrity of all the systems that will educate all the young people in Ontario for decades to come. If it passes, the rest of the provinces in Canada will follow suit. The fact that this bill is already through second reading is inexcusable. Wake up, Canadians, before you do yourself and your children irreparable harm.
So, I know Jordan is a special kind of person. And the idea and his way of thinking, to me, it kind of sits in my head for a while before I think about it. I listen to what he says. I read some of the backup documentation according to what he says, the bills, the laws, how things work, how representatives talk about things, and who gets to make these decisions about how they happen. And basically what he's saying here is, if we, the people, I talk about this a lot, we, the people, us as the people, do not decide how, when, and what our children, our future generations do learn, understand, and how they treat each other, the government or the leaders of these worlds and these continents and these nations, they will decide. They will decide. So if you need to be put separate from everybody and you want to be called a certain thing at a certain time for a certain reason, they will oblige. But then they are going to keep us all separated. And they will figure out a way how to do it. I can tell you that much, right? They taught farmers and agricultural people how to keep animals alive and to do the things that they wanted to do with them. They learned. So they will learn how to do it with us. If we do not take back this understanding of who we are and how we educate ourselves, how we educate young adults, how we educate young children. Again, the understanding and the memory that we the people are the ones that formed education systems. We, the people, are the ones that made these decisions for these things to happen. When and how we lost this idea of what the control is to governments, I don't know. I don't know when this happened. It's been this way since I've been a child. But I can tell you here in this country, again, we're not that old. We're only a few hundred years old. So the idea of how these things formed and where they are today, we the people have lost sight of it and lost the understanding of how much of it we actually control, because we allowed them to create bills, create laws, create amendments. We allowed them to create all these things without our understanding and knowledge that we have the control over this. We do. We have a lot more of it. We're not educating ourselves. We're not educating ourselves as to how this should be really happening and who has the power of the education and what gets taught. Okay? I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are ways. There are ways that us, not just the PTA, not just parents going up to the school and the school dictating how things can be done or should be done or need to be done, how it actually gets done, right? So if you think that your child is not learning in the capacity of whatever that is or whatever they're teaching or whatever that curriculum is, we have allowed them to tell us that there's something wrong with the child or something wrong with that learning adult. We allowed them to do that, right? So when is it that we take this back? When is it that we take back the idea of the education has to come from all forms of education, not just what the school systems dictate to us? Not just that the kids go to school and they come home with books and mounds of homework and this, and they manipulate their brains and they give them so much work to do that they do not have time to think for themselves. Isn't that how it works? When you want to keep somebody busy and out of trouble, don't you just give them more things to do? More things to remember? More things to regurgitate? It's not a good learning process. It's not an educational system. It's a regurgitation process of how we manipulate and conform. That's what it is. And that's how it's getting worse. It's getting worse to the point where it's happening at a younger age, right? Because I remember when I went to school, it was ABCs, you got a break and lunch and cookies, and you went out in the schoolyard and you played with your friends and you did things and you put frogs in your pocket and whatever it was. And you got to act a little funny every once in a while and you got to do certain things as young children do. And you have to let them explore and let them understand that they have a mind of their own and they get to think for themselves. Not to hurt anybody. We all know that. Let's be smart enough where we don't get the comments here where everybody's like, hey, don't let them this, that. And I go, yeah, that's great. Everybody knows common sense. I hope anyway, right? We would hope that most people know common sense. Sometimes the educational system, you can't teach common sense. You have to know what it is as it comes. And that's the truth right here. Everybody knows I'm going to go through the gamut. I just want to say thank you for stopping by and listening. I know I go in places where a lot of people don't want to think. I go into these areas where it has to stir up something. It has to stir up the thought process in everybody, right? And if you think so, please make sure you subscribe to my channel. That really helps, right? That lets me keep on with all the shenanigans. I really do appreciate that. So subscribe if you like. That would really help out right there. And I know any questions, any comments, anything to open up dialogue about these situations that are happening now, please leave them below. Leave them in the questions and comments. I read them. I would love for everybody to open up the dialogue so we can all keep talking about this. This is the only way things get out in the open. Like they say, once you put it out there, somebody else is going to take a hold of it and maybe get it somewhere where it needs to be, right? So that's another part why you should be leaving questions and comments and talking this up. It really does. And listen to me. Share this with anybody you think may find this useful or totally hilarious. One or the other. I'm not sure. But just share it with them anyway. They may find it totally amusing. You may make somebody's day. That's the truth. All my social media links, they're down in the description below. If you want to follow me on any of them, they're over there. There's a link to my website. Try and support your boy. If not, just watch and listen and leave a comment. It really does help, right? You can also find my podcast on these platforms where you can listen to just the audio, okay? And the links are in the description as well. That would really help. And I got a new one, folks. Everybody watch. Here we go. I told you this was going to happen, right? Boom. Look at that. Those are my other 2 channels, Building and Fixing, right? Up here. And over there, Cooking and Eating on that side right there. I just put up a new cooking and eating video. You'll find the link, not to that video, but you'll find the link to my cooking and eating in the description below as well. So I hope you guys are doing that. Try and go over there and subscribe. Listen, I have to get my subs up there, right? So I can't do lives and do anything like that here on the YouTube thing yet until my subs get up there. So I got to get to 1K. So I don't know. Everybody go over there and subscribe on my other channels. That would really help. I appreciate you. That's it right there. And if you like this, give it a thumbs up right there. Give it a thumbs up. I like you too right there. And make sure after you do that, you get your bell rung. Ring the bell so you get notified when I put, a video up here or on any of my other channels. That really does help. So let's try that out right there real quick. Did I leave? And that's really the long and short of it. And you know who's getting the GOAT today. Everybody knows already, just from my conversation, you know who's getting the GOAT today. The GOAT today goes to the public educational systems and all other educational systems out there that are not teaching our young children and our young adults to think for themselves. Please allow them to think for themselves. Give them just enough to make the brain work. Because I've said this before, okay, and I'm going to say it again, and that is, I've gone to college a few times already, and I love learning. That's the whole idea, is learning, to learn, to make the mind express and think for itself. But I've gone to college and been through the public school system, been to colleges, graduated with degrees in all different kinds of fields. And the understanding that when you walk out, and if I asked one of these other young adults what it is they learned, they couldn't answer the question. They couldn't answer for themselves. They'd have to ask, is it going to be on the test? Or was that something I learned already? No, it's not a good way. We have to be educating to educate, not to regurgitate. That's the truth. Hey, Sailor, how are you? I can't express that enough. To me, that's very, very important, extremely important to me that we understand these things. Because if not, and I know it's been said before, but when you think about it, we are a very young country, and everything that we do here is very young. Everything, right? The education system, the way our government runs, the way we think about democracy and the rest of the world thinks about democracy, we all do it different. I know it's the truth right there. That's the truth. And you know what I always say, right? You can't help but think about these things, right? So there is no wrong answer. When you're thinking about answers to certain things, there are no wrong answers. But I'm sure, believe me, I've been in class before, because like I said, I've been back to school many times. I've been in class before where I heard teachers talk and I go, wrong, wrong. You can't do that. I was actually in class when I was in culinary school. I'm in culinary school. Listen to me. I'm in culinary school. Culinary school. Do you understand? It's food, the process of food making, food history, food biology, all those things related to food and culinary of the arts of all kind, from soup to nuts, from nuts to soup, whatever it may be. And I'm in class one day, right? And it just so happens that the teacher in the class teaching all these young adults about his own philosophies about politics, this, that, anything, nothing related to food, what he was supposed to be teaching. And I had to stop him in the middle of one of his little talks. And I said, excuse me, I'm not being rude. Maybe I am. But it's not your place to be letting anybody in this room know what your political views are, what your beliefs are, what you think is right and wrong. That is not for you to be giving to anybody else in this room. You are here to teach this part of the culinary curriculum. You need to stick to that. And he looked at me like, really? And do you know why? Because I wasn't a young adult with the mindset of whatever they're saying must be correct. No, my mindset was, you are here to educate in a particular area. And that's what you should be doing. You should not be pawning off any of your views to anyone in this room. They are not your children, and you are not here for that reason. That's okay. It's all right. He understood. And I still got an A in the class. But that, to me...
Oh, hell no!
That's what I felt like. I felt like, no, not your place. Not for you to be telling anybody. That's just the way it is. That's the way I feel. That's the truth. And I'm going to go true because you'll listen to me. I've been working diligently, educating myself on the idea of doing this broadcasting and this live stream because it means a lot to me. So the educating is that I learn a little bit from somebody, and then I take my thinking capacity that I get to think for myself, and I learn the rest, and I learn new ways, and I figure it out on my own. Because I don't think that the process of thinking for yourself is such a hard thing to do. If you have a problem, it needs to be solved. If there is something you want to do, you should figure it out. That's how it works. And you shouldn't have somebody else telling you it's right, wrong, or indifferent. There's a cliche that works. There's a million ways to skin a cat. I'm not saying go out there and skin any cats. Don't do that. That's probably not a good thing to do. But when you are thinking, and I'm running through this because I added a lot of stuff to my broadcast, you have to take that time. You have to take that time.
Oh my God, who the hell cares?
I do. We all know that. We all know that I care. And that's the reason. There is no other reason. The reason is that I care. I care the way I think. I care the way people think, just in general. My curiosity to know what somebody's thinking and how they're thinking and why they're thinking, I think is the greatest education, and the best way to educate yourself is to go out there and explore and make your own summation, make your own conclusions on things, on how they should be done, how they shouldn't be done, and why they should be done. You shouldn't be waiting for direction all the time from anybody. You should be kind of trying to get out there on your own and do whatever is necessary, I guess, to get whatever it is you want done. To think for yourself. If you think the one thing isn't right, then think of another way to do it, right? Solution is the answer, right? Gripe is not the answer. Complaining is not the answer. All those things are not the answer. Figuring out a solution to the problem or the issue is the answer. That's the true education. That's the true education. That's what we all need. We all need the true education. And that's all I got time for today, folks. Today may have been, I think today was a little long, right? No, about an hour. About an hour. That's the truth right there. And I hope everybody gets a little something out of it. It's not just me talking nonsense. You know, I kind of think that certain things need to be said, and the way things are, more people need to say it. I think that's just the way it is. And I don't know. I could be wrong. I could be right. Nobody will ever know. But that's the truth right there. But I truly enjoy all of this, and I can't say thank you enough, everybody. You know, I love all my new little buttons here. I think they're great. It's got the little funny stuff. It's That's the wrong answer. That's the wrong. I really do enjoy education. I really do enjoy the learning process of anything. I don't care what it is. And that's it, folks. I got to go. That's my time. You know my message, and that's every day is a good day. And if you give a smile, believe me, folks, you give a smile, you're going to get a smile. Give a bunch of them smiles out there, folks. We all need them. We all want them. And it don't hurt nobody to smile at them. Turn that frown upside down, folks. I'm out. Love, peace, and bacon grease.